This is Sophie Lawson from sophielawson.com, and this is episode 32 of the So Free Art podcast, which is a little podcast I do each week about art and things. And this one's going to be about Inktober 2018, days 1 to 5, because Inktober started on Monday, and I've been drawing along with it, and I thought it might be quite good to do a little podcast about it. So that's the main topic. The little art tip is going to be a little thing I do when I'm doing realistic pencil drawings. When I'm drawing them freehand, it's a little tip I use, and all you need is a little sheet of paper. So that's going to be this week's little art tip. You can find show notes and everything for the podcast at sophielawson.com, and you can also find me on YouTube at youtube.com/sophielawson, and I just put up a new video about Inktober, which kind of goes along with this podcast. But let's jump in. I might also at the end talk about, because I watched a video on YouTube with Elon Musk, and he was talking about he's got like a fear of, he thinks it's inevitable that AI is going to take over, and it kind of made me start thinking about something which I might talk about right at the very end of the podcast. But let's jump into this week's main topic, which is Inktober 2018 and the first 5 days. And I've wrote a little blog post which I'll put in the show notes. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to read through the little blog post, but because there were some things in there which I didn't really talk about. And I started the blog post by saying plans, what plans? Because this often happens when I do art challenges, is that you spend a few days before the challenge trying to plan everything about what you're going to do. But what normally happens is, as soon as you start the challenge, all your plans sort of go out the window. But I do feel like the plans are never wasted. Because even though I'm not doing what I plan to do, I'm still sort of doing what I did plan to do, which is a bit weird. But because I'd planned to draw a little Sophie every single day for 31 days, and I was going to draw her cosplaying video game characters. But what I've ended up doing is I've ended up doing 2 little drawings each day, and one of them is like a straight copy of a reference photo of video game character, and the other one is a little Sophie, but it's more of like a free flowing one. So whereas I'm doing sort of 2 little drawings, one is almost feels a bit like a realistic pencil drawing, but instead of doing pencils, it's with ink. And then the other one, which is the little Sophie, that feels more like sort of like doing a gesture drawing or sketching. It's much more. It's not as strict. So one of them is focusing on the details, and the other one is more about capturing a gesture and the essence. So it's kind of worked quite well. And the reason I did that was because when I first started the challenge on day 1, I just realised that I kind of didn't really know what I was doing with the inks. And I already knew I didn't know what I was doing, but I didn't realise how much I didn't know what I was doing, which is quite funny. But so I decided that what I wanted to do was to try to get a feel for how the inks work. Instead of trying to do too many things at once with the one drawing, I decided to do one drawing focusing on the details, which with that one I don't really have to think too much. I can just copy what I'm seeing, and then the other one I can be a bit more creative with it. So it kind of just works quite well. So on day 1 on days 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, I did 5 little Persona 4 characters, Chie, Yukiko, Nanako, Rise and Naoto, and they are like Persona 4 is my favourite video game of all time. It's actually Persona 4 is the game that introduced art into my life. So without Persona 4 I probably wouldn't have started drawing. And I feel like, because whenever I do these challenges, I always end up drawing Persona 4 characters. And my goal one day is to be able to create my own versions of these characters, because at the moment I'm still really just copying photos, But one day I want to be able one day I want to be able to create a completely original drawing of these characters, because I just love drawing these characters. And then the other 5 days, what I ended up doing was I ended up looking at different artists that I've not seen before, and I would look at these artists and I would find one of their drawings that I really liked, or a sketch, and I would turn it into a little Sophie. And I'll put links in the show notes to all of the drawings I did. It's probably better to look at the video, because on the video I look at each of these artists and I show some of their artwork, and I feel like these artists are amazing, and one of the main things I love about Inktober so far is the amount of new artwork that I'm finding. So this is actually quite fun, because I'm finding new artists, and I'm also practicing how to draw Little Sophie, and I'm also practicing how to draw with inks. So there's quite a lot of different things that I'm learning in just these one drawings. And I also found a load more, because what I was doing was, when I was sharing my images on Instagram and stuff, I was looking at the Instagram hashtags, and it's just amazing how many different drawings are being created. And this is what I love as well about looking at other people's art, is there's two things. One is everybody's art is completely different, and it's quite exciting to see everybody's art and see what people are doing. But what I noticed was, I think it was yesterday, I was looking at this artwork, and I suddenly got this real sense that the artist is inside the drawing. And it's hard to explain, but I just got this feeling that, because everybody's artwork is completely different, I think that is because every single artist is completely different. But it is like there's some part of the artist in the drawing, and I can't really explain what it is, but I just really felt it, and it was a really nice feeling. So that's something else I'm really enjoying as well, is just like looking through the hashtags. And what I've done is I've allowed myself 30 minutes at the end of the day to look at the hashtags, and I'm just finding a load of new artists because of Inktober. But some of the things I learnt this week, which I quickly wrote about on the blog post but didn't really explain, I'll talk about them now. So the first thing I said was that it takes ages to find something to draw each day, and I feel like this is a mistake that I've been doing. Is what I've done is each day I've been going onto the computer to try to find something to draw, and I think what might be a better way to do it is to, at the start of each week, maybe spend 2 hours like finding loads of images at once, so that each day you can just jump into the drawing. Because if the way I'm doing it at the moment, finding the artwork each day, it just means I'm spending like about an hour before I can actually start drawing. I'm spending an hour trying to find what to draw, and it is fun, like trying to find what to draw, but I don't really want to be spending an hour every day doing that. So that's the first thing. The second thing I said was that you discover so many new inspiring artists being part of Inktober, and I've sort of talked about that already. Something else I said about is that I've found, and I randomly found this, is a neat little trick in Photoshop where you can turn any photo into like an ink drawing friendly version, and I can't really explain this, but I covered it in the video. I walked through it on Photoshop, but all it is you get a photo, and one of the filters in Photoshop, you can turn any image into like a black and white. It almost looks like a line art drawing. And so what I've been doing is I've been printing that out and putting it side by side with my sketchbook, and that's how I've been doing my little drawings. So that's worked really quite well. The next thing I said was that ink drawing is a lot like realistic pencil drawing, and what this is about is I've noticed that a lot of the skills that I've learnt from pencil drawings, they actually translate almost directly into inking, and I never thought that was what it was going to be like, because when I've done like Well, actually, when I did the digital painting, I felt the same thing, is that a lot of the traditional pencil drawing skills, they helped me like get into the digital painting, and I feel like the same thing has happened here with the inking. So I'd almost say that this highlights how the main skill with drawing is probably pencil drawings. It's almost like pencil drawing is the foundation of everything else. So digital painting, if you've got good pencil skills, it kind of helps you with the digital. And I think the same thing is happening with the inking. And almost with traditional painting, it's almost the same, because a lot of the paintings, they start with a pencil drawing. And I feel like the pencil drawing is probably the foundation of most artwork. So if the pencil drawing is good, it means that if your skills with these things you're putting on top of the pencil aren't as good, I feel like it would probably be better to have really good pencil drawing skills and not so good art, and not so good, say, inking or digital painting skills, rather than have really good digital painting skills or inking skills, but not so good pencil drawing skills. Because if you've not got good pencil drawing skills, but you've got really good like inking, but your inking is based off the pencil drawing, that means the pencil drawing is going to affect the inking, so that it's not going to look as good because the pencil drawing wasn't as good, like the foundation. Whereas if it goes the other way, if you have a really good pencil drawing, but your inking isn't as good, I feel like that would be better, because the pencil drawing is still going to show through. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's sort of something I learnt. Something else I said was that drawing your own characters is so much fun, and this is something I've learnt through the other challenges as well. I spent probably about 3 years doing nothing but realistic pencil drawings, and once I started designing my own characters, which is Little Sophie, it just becomes so much more fun, and it makes me feel like this is what I want to be doing in the future, is designing my own characters. So that's something else I've learnt. I also said that it feels scary knowing you're committing to a line and can't erase it. And that's the thing with inking, is with pencil drawings, even with realistic pencil drawings, you can commit to a line, but you kind of, in the back of your head, you know that if you do mess it up, you can erase it, but you can't do that with fine liners. And that's quite scary, actually, because some of the lines you have to like, I feel like the lines are going to look sexier if you're confident, because you can do the long sweeping lines, but like if there's any doubt as you're doing that line, I think it will show through. So it is a little bit scary for me, knowing that when I'm putting the inks down, I'm not going to be able to erase them. There is a moment that's kind of similar with realistic pencil drawings, and that's right at the end when you're doing the hair. Like if you have strands of hair that come off the face, those are the lines that have to be the most confident, because you want to have like long sweeping lines as if it's hair that's out of control, and because that's going over the top of the face, which you've spent hours drawing, you're not going to really be able to erase that line. So that's kind of a moment that's kind of similar to this line art, the scary feeling that I get from working with the inks. The next thing I said was that Derwent Graphics fine liners are amazing, especially the 0.1. And before I started this challenge, I thought I was going to be using a Tombow brush pen, but as I started working with all the different tools that I had, I realised that what I actually wanted was the smallest tip I could get, because I'm working so small in the sketchbook. I want to have a really thin fine liner, and the Derwent one is a 0.1, and it's just working really well. And again, this is almost making it feel a bit like doing realistic pencil drawings, working with the mechanical pencils. But those Derwent Graphics fine liners are really amazing. I'll put a link in the show notes. And what's really nice about them, which I show on the video, is they come in this little package, but it looks really nice. It's like a grey and black flower pattern, like little wallet, and it just looks really cool. That was one of the main reasons why I bought them, to be honest. The next thing I said is that if you erase too soon, you'll smudge the ink. And the thing is, I still find myself doing this, even though I think I haven't made it a habit yet, but when I finished the inking, I've still got the pencil showing, and there's part of me that just wants to quickly erase the pencil so I can see what it looks like, but I haven't learnt yet how long it takes for the inks to dry, and as I'm erasing the pencils, I keep smudging some of my ink, especially little dots, like little details. They seem to smudge the most. But something I have found that's quite helpful is I've got this mono eraser pen, which I spoke about on one of the very first podcasts when I was looking at my favourite art tools, and I didn't realise, but this is a really good tool for erasing with fine liners because it's got such a fine tip, and you can use it like a pencil. You can actually go in and erase the pencil from the edge of the ink without really making contact with the ink, and it just works really well. So that's quite a little good thing I've learnt. The final thing I said for the first 5 days of Inktober was some of the same rules apply as when using pencils, like working top to bottom and left to right if right-handed to avoid smudging. And this is something that I think sometimes it feels obvious, but it's something that I often forget, and that is when you're doing a drawing and it appears as that it's the same rules for inking, it's actually my first art teacher who said this. Before she told me, I always used to work like all over the place, but she said a good thing to do is to work for me, because I'm right-handed, is to work top left and work down the page like that, because then your hand is never going to be on top of what you've just drawn. And the same thing works with the fine liners, so that was quite a good little thing to learn. And I think that's it really. The rest of the blog post talks about like what I've been doing, and it talks about the next 7 days. And what I'm thinking about doing for the next 7 days of Inktober is carrying on copying other artists' drawings and turning them into little Sophie. But I'm thinking about, instead of doing Persona 4 drawings, I'm thinking about doing 7 Thundercat drawings, because as a kid I loved the Thundercats, and I just had this random thought last week that Thundercat characters would look really good in ink, especially using that Photoshop filter that I've been doing. So I'm going to give that a go later today and see if it looks good, and if it does, I'm going to do 7 Thundercat drawings. So I think that would be quite fun, and I might talk about that on next week's podcast. I'm not sure yet, but I think the podcasts for October might be all about Inktober, just like things I've learnt and stuff. So that is basically this week's main topic. It's all about Inktober, the first 5 days, and that means it is time for this week's little art tip of the week, and it's a really little one this week, and it is all about something when I'm doing realistic pencil drawings, but I'm not using a grid, so I'm drawing freehand. A good little thing I've done, or I've learnt to help me with my proportions, is what I'll do is I'll have a little bit of paper by my side, and as I'm drawing, let's say I'm drawing an eye freehand, I'll draw the eye very lightly with the pencil, and then if I look at it and I think I'm not sure if that's quite right, what I do is I get this little bit of paper and I'll put it on top of the reference image, and using the pencil I'll just mark the beginning of the eye and the end of the eye, so you've got like 2 little dots on your paper, on the edge of the paper. And then what I'll do is I'll take that piece of paper and I'll put it on top of my eye that I've just drawn, and I'll line the 2 little dots up, and I'll see if they like sync up with what I've drawn. And what you'll notice is that most of the time it actually does, but every so often it doesn't. And so it's quite good just to do this all the time, really, just to... sometimes it gives you confidence because you think, I've actually got that perfect, and that's quite a nice feeling. But other times you think you've got it right, and you're actually quite a long way off. And that happens quite a lot. It's when you think you've got it wrong that you haven't. And then when you think you've done it right, you haven't. It's quite funny, that. So that's this week's little art tip. It's basically all about always having a little bit of paper with you so that you can just check your measurements as you're drawing. And I think all these little art tips, they are going to be ending up on YouTube. At the moment I'm focusing on Inktober, but like in next month and stuff, I'm going to be turning all these art tips into YouTube videos. And I think these will work better on video as well because I'll be able to demonstrate them. So that is this week's little art tip. And now I was going to quickly talk about something, which is a video I saw on YouTube where Joe Rogan was interviewing Elon Musk. And I'll put links in the show notes to that as well. But on this little video, Elon Musk was talking about how he thinks it is inevitable that AI is now going to take over, and that ultimately what will happen is we will end up, like, our consciousness will end up getting put inside of the computer. And he sort of thinks that this could go quite in a bad way, but also could go in quite a good way. But he seemed to be sort of a bit upset that it was happening. But this made me think about something, and I'll talk about this briefly, but if I look, it just made me feel like that the past is the future. Because ever since I started lucid dreaming, it's kind of opened up this big, like, rabbit hole that I've jumped into, and it covers so many things, and it's one of the things is it sort of takes you down looking at ancient civilizations and stuff. And I just have this feeling that with AI, if we do end up putting ourselves into the AI, like our consciousness, I have this strange feeling that which is the future will end up becoming the past. And I almost wonder whether, like, somehow maybe in the future we time travel backwards in time and become like Egyptians or something, and that's how we make the pyramids and stuff. But the reason I say this is because, like, with lucid dreaming, it just makes me feel like reality isn't it, or that reality is like a dream. And if you look at all the ancient civilizations and stuff, they were all very spiritual, and they all believed that, like, we are basically a spirit inside of a physical body. But that just sounds so much to me like putting our consciousness inside of like a robot. It almost to me it sounds like the same thing. So I'm almost wondering whether what's happening here is we are in a cycle where we keep putting ourselves into this thing, and which sort of like resets, puts ourselves back to where we started, where we don't know we've put ourselves in it. And then what happens is we just spend years and years realising that we're inside of it, or no, we end up spending years and years creating something that we can put ourselves into, but that ends up putting us back where we started. It's quite hard for me to explain, but I have this feeling that we are stuck in this cycle. And so this kind of links in with what I said last week on the podcast, where I said about how I feel like I have a creator who is dreaming me. And so I am like the dream character for this creator. But that to me would be like the creator would be like me. If in the future I was to put myself into this robot, my consciousness in the robot would be like a dream. So it almost makes me feel like AI could start to explain what is going on with the dreams and all these different realities and stuff. So it was just something I thought about. I don't know if it makes sense, but it also goes back to the other thing I said on one of the other podcasts about how I played PlayStation VR for the first time a few months ago, and that experience made me feel like that too was so much like a lucid dream, where it was real, or it wasn't real, but it felt so real. It just felt so much like a dream. And that's when I started thinking that like dreams could be like a virtual reality. And then when you start thinking that in the future we could put our consciousness into a robot with like AI, you start to think maybe what's happened here is in the past we put ourselves into this body and we didn't realise it. We don't realise it now because maybe we put ourselves into it and like forgot that we did it. And maybe the whole point of life is to work out what you did so you can get yourself out of it. And maybe you got to get yourself out of it before you put yourself back into it in the future, into another one. Because what I was thinking was, if we do put our consciousness into a robot, and that, like, say the same thing happened again, like that, you're then going to get deeper and deeper away from what you really are. Because if it is the way that I think it is, in that we keep doing this over and over again, that would mean that even if we woke up from this life and became the creator, that creator would have done the same thing. And so that you would then have to spend years as that creator trying to work out how, if you had done it again. And then that creator would then wake up, but maybe the same thing has kept happening. And that kind of goes into what I said last week on the podcast about how I think my creator has its own creator, and it keeps going backwards until you get to the original source. So that's just something I'm thinking about. It just fascinates me how I'm realising, or I'm noticing how everything seems to be linked. Like all the scientists with the quantum, all the scientists with like quantum theories and stuff, all the ancient civilizations and like all the spiritual people and stuff, and all the lucid dreaming and everything, they all seem to be saying the same thing. And I just feel like it's all going to end up going to the same point. So it just fascinates me, and I'm just really enjoying like trying to work out what is going on, because it's quite, to me, it just feels quite obvious that something isn't right with like our reality. It just feels like there's something that we're missing. And it feels like you're inside of, it almost feels to me like we are a piece of a puzzle inside a big puzzle, and we're trying to work out what the image of the puzzle is with only our little piece. That's what it feels like to me, and I just finding it quite exciting, really. So that was just something I thought I'd throw at the end of the podcast, and I do believe that is it for this week's podcast. So you can find show notes and everything at sophielawson.com. If you have any comments or anything you'd like to talk about on the podcast, you can send me a message at sophielawson.com/contact, or you can go to my YouTube at youtube.com/sophielawson and post a comment in one of the podcasts. And all that's left now is this week's inspirational quote, and it actually goes to one of the artists that I found this week, and it's Genevieve FT, and the quote is, "You need to show your creation to the world." Genevieve FT.